What's going on? Daily Racing Form Players Podcast on a Friday. Matt Bernier, Mike Hogan, the third member of the team today. What is your overall actual title?
Advertising Director.
Advertising Director. Most of you know him more commonly as Eric Wing in the horse racing world. Eric, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Matt?
We're good. We're good. Mr. Hogan, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Everybody's happy? It's Friday?
Everybody's happy. Yeah.
Hey, yeah. It's payday here at DRF.
That's always a good thing. Getting paid's always a good thing.
So I'm still ahead for the weekend.
Right now, at the moment, we're all in the black.
So you're going
to
use some of that for to tack the double carryover today, Doc?
No, I don't go after pick sixes with great zeal, Mike. I'm much more active, much more liable to go as I did earlier this week after a pick four, even with a minuscule carryover at a Mahoning Valley.
Ah, yes, of course.
Where you can still get good value.
Because this is going to come up in a little bit. This sort of topic about where, and we'll get into it momentarily. But
yeah, you got some ideas for the show.
I
like that.
Because
I like that. You play the host, man.
We're in a little bit of that again. We're in that lull period, post Breeders' Cup, pre NHC, pre real Derby preps, anything like that. We got the Cigar Mile, we got the Clark coming up, but really things are kind of. And let's not give short shrift to the Hollywood Turf Festival. That'll be at Del Mar in a few weeks, but.
No, you know what I was thinking, Matt? You're absolutely right. On paper, this should be sort of a lull period. I'm surprised how many good races there are this weekend. And the card at Laurel is fabulous.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit last week on DRF Live that, Gulfstream West had a really big day last Saturday with a lot of 2-year-old stakes and that kind of thing. And Dan and I talked about it a little bit. Mike and Dan were on for the majority of those races. I happened to hit one of them when I came on. But I kind of like that idea where, you know what, and we talk about Woodbine all the time, where they card a lot of their big stuff on Sundays. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a smart idea when you think about it. If all the attention is on Southern California and New York and Florida on Saturdays, why try and compete with that? Why not take your marquee sort of events and make that the focus on a Sunday, where now you have another, you become the focus on that day rather than sharing it with 4 or 5 other circuits. Mm-hmm.
It used to be. That used to also be the case in Southern California at Santa Anita. Quite often the biggest race of the week was on Sunday. As time has gone on, especially in the fall, it's been, I think, largely an attempt to stay away from NFL football competition, which may be less of an issue up in Canada. Ironically, I was up there with our friends at Woodbine 2-3 weeks ago and mentioned that in passing, that a lot of your races are at Sun. And it's something that they are aware of, and they struggle with it is too strong a word, but it's part of their. It's not a black and white case for them. It's something they question, decide, experiment with. And so
I got a question for you. So when you mentioned that, notice a lot of your stakes races are on Sunday, did they say sorry?
No, they did not. Okay, they did not.
They spell center. C-E-N-T.
R-E.
R-E-R. Century.
Some British influence creeps into the written language.
How did they? Were they over the Toronto Blue Jays?
I didn't bring it up in part. I didn't want it. I was afraid the wound was still a little too fresh, so I didn't really want to go there. It was intended as a friendly visit.
And don't want to be making enemies with our brethren to the north.
Right, and you never know who's had a couple of grand on one team or the other, or is just simply a die-hard fan. So it's kind of like talking about religion. You just at that point
better off let it be.
Stay out of it.
Let it be. Let's dive into the first thing. Mike, you brought it up. That I just kind of the other night was thinking a little bit, just stuff that we can chop up. We're gonna have to create some stuff to talk about.
I think we'll have plenty of you can't shut us up usually.
We're kind of in that point now where, from a talking standpoint, Illman and I went out after the show Saturday night was over, and we were talking about overall just horses and faro and all this other stuff. And it kind of just dawned on me to bring it up to him, someone that's been in the game for a heck of a lot longer than I have. Who's the best horse, not of your lifetime, because, many people can say as a 2 or 3-year-old that, Secretariat ran. Well, I don't count that.
Right.
In the time that you've been paying attention to racing, who's the best horse that you have seen on the racetrack? And I don't want to narrow it. I'm not going to hold a gun to your head. Say one. I mean, because for me, there's two that stand out. But you guys have been in it for longer than I have. Let's start with Eric, and we'll just work our way around. If you had to pick one or two, I mean, are there a couple that just come right to mind?
Yeah, the two really do jump out at me. And Secretariat was just before my time.
Okay.
I wish that weren't the case. I wish I were paying attention when I was that age, but I wasn't. But I was paying attention by 1977. And Seattle Slew for me. I remember Harvey Pack once said, and I think there's a lot of truth to it, we tend to fall in love with or put on a pedestal horses, baseball players, athletes, whatever, that hit us where we live when we're in those teenage years or
formative years.
Yeah, the formative years. Maybe as we get older, we get a little more cynical. Or,
same goes for music, I would say.
Probably so. I still
the music
love
you listen to in high school and college is for most people.
A Van Halen song comes on, the world stops. But so I'm sure it's the same with horses. But for better or worse, it's in terms of just greatness, it was Seattle Slew. The most charismatic horse I ever saw, who was also extremely good, was John Henry.
It wasn't charismatic?
No, it wasn't charismatic. John Henry was, I was lucky enough to be at his last race ever, which was the Ballantine Scotch Classic at the Meadowlands in 1983. He snatched victory from the jaws of defeat when it looked like he had no shot at the top of the stretch. I still remember him, Chris McCarron bringing him back, and they had a brand new, what was sort of avant-garde back then, a video board at the in the infield, and it was just one of those things where he brought him back, and John Henry stood like this, like a statue, as if he was looking at himself on the video board, and the whole crowd almost erupted in laughter, which was something I had never quite experienced at a track. And then, I don't mean to keep going on and on, a horse that I thought was just devastating for the period he was racing that you don't hear people talk much about anymore is Smarty Jones. Just thoroughly annihilated the horses up until the Belmont Stakes that he was up against. And I have to throw American Pharoah in that mix, only, I'd like a little time to have hit settle, but he's right up there,
I guess that's my thing, too, and we'll kind of turn it over to Mike, but is the Pharaoh sort of hype and not hype, but the love of this horse, is it more a matter of because it had taken so long, and we all wanted it to happen so badly, and we all became kind of attached to him? Is it because of that, or is it because this was truly one of figures aside? Obviously a 120 that puts him right up there with any of these.
Sure.
But is it more a matter of that thirst was there for him to finally, or someone to finally do it? Or does he stack up with these names?
I think it's a little bit because we were, dying for a Triple Crown winner, but I think that's okay. Because the reason why we were dying for it is because it's so darn hard to do. And it didn't seem that way in the 70s, and, yawn, Spectacular Bid's going to win another one. And, well, he didn't, but that should be points in his favor to me rather than points against him.
Sure.
The fact, we would fall in love with any horse that won the Triple Crown. He won the Triple Crown. Give him his due.
What do you think?
I think he stacks up, and for a number of reasons. There's that, but even not really that, just in terms of what I've seen and how he's done it. Not just one track. He wasn't, some of the detractors for, say, the Zenyatas, of whether or not she fits into the greatest of the greats, or certainly the greatest of the last 20 or 30 years, some of the detractors are, she didn't really travel. American Pharoah went all over the country. It was almost like a North American tour.
Yeah, it really
as a 3-year-old
was.
campaign. Yeah. And that is not really how a lot of the horses have been managed in the last 20 or 30, since we've had a Triple Crown winner. That might have been more the case with, you mentioned John Henry.
Yeah, I was going to say, similar there.
Yeah, those kinds of horses that can do it not just on their favorite surface or not just on one kind of surface, but show brilliance and show consistently across multiple different types of surfaces. I mean, the Santa Anita surface, or the Del Mar surface for that matter, plays almost nothing like the Belmont surface, even though they're both dirt tracks. And, you know, I think you have to give points for not just winning the Triple Crown, hasn't been done in so long, but doing it on so many different types of tracks. And, you know, boy, that Preakness was, I mean, you were there.
Yeah.
I mean, you know better than I do. I mean, it became...
It really got to that point where with the Belmont, I think all of us, not only were we hoping it would happen, but we were hoping it was going to be some sort of a spectacular, like, that he earned it, that it wasn't someone, you know, faltering and, you know, like Frosted ran his race.
Yeah, absolutely.
He handled him. He put him away. The Haskell was still, for me, one of the most visually odd things I've ever seen, because now, coming from someone that's not really... I've not been around horses much. I mean, I've gotten to see some good ones, and you know, but not truly from, like, you know, I'm not going there in the mornings. I didn't grow up with them or anything like that. So when they come by the first time and he just looks, it looks like one of his strides is two of Competitive Edge's, and Competitive Edge at the time was a very good horse. That's when you start to look at it and you go, this doesn't look right. For the positive side, not because it looks like, oh, there's something wrong. Like,
freak.
Yeah, like this is not how I say normal horses look, because he's not a normal horse. He's better than that.
Well,
and
there's
then,
ordinary and extraordinary.
exactly,
You know?
and that was kind of that first sort of I don't want to say the first time, but for me it was seeing it, being that close to him, being like, holy smokes, this is weird,
Right.
Because this isn't like anything else. You know, whether it was a Rachel or a Zenyatta or, I mean, you name it, any California Chrome, or I'll have another. It didn't look the same as even the Rachels or the Zenyatas or the Blames or anything. It just looked different. And the way that he did it with such ease. And how many? I've never ever seen another horse. Now again, I haven't been paying attention as long as you guys have. That there have been numerous times in his career where turning for home, his ears are up straight, and it's like he hasn't run a step, like he hasn't taken a deep breath. And I think that was my favorite part about his races down at Oaklawn, was in each one of them off of a long layoff with a foot problem, and then the Arkansas Derby, I mean, it was like he was out like 2-minute lick almost, except he was going a heck of a lot faster. Like, so I kind of agree with you. I think he does actually stack up. For you though, where is he of your time? Where, I mean, he's not the top, I kind of get the vibe.
Well, you know, it's tough. And for me to answer this, I kind of have to give a little bit of my history. I mean, although I've been following horse racing since I was a kid, and since I was 8, when I first learned to read the racing form with my grandfather going to the OTB or going to Saratoga, I've been a fan of horse racing since then. I haven't been an active fan or follower or horse player since then necessarily, because, you know, in high school, you know, I got more into music and baseball. And, you know, I would follow the Kentucky Derby and I'd pay attention and I'd watch whenever it was on TV, but I wasn't actively really engaged in the game from the time I spent my summers with my grandfather, which stopped in my late teens, until really 2005 is when I got back into it again in earnest. And I would follow along horses. You know, the first horse that I ever picked to win the Kentucky Derby, or first long shot I ever picked to win the Kentucky Derby, was Ferdinand. You know, I mean, I remember the Holy Bulls. I went to the first Breeders' Cup, for instance. You know, I was a young teenager. You know, I don't have huge memories of Wild Again, or even later. You know, I mean, when I was in my 20s, you know, Holy Bull.
Right.
I remember him,
But not vividly.
but not vividly. And so really 2005 was the first year I got back into it. And so for me, the ones, and again, I use, for my criteria of greatness, I'm going to use something similar to what you were saying. It was, they make good horses look ordinary.
Right.
I would say that about American Pharoah. I'd say he's right up there. others that I saw, probably in 2005, the first one that really jumped out at me was Fleet Alex.
Okay.
You know, and as I mean, I would say his Preakness was, and his Belmont was as good as his Preakness. Preakness is the one everyone remembers because of that stumble.
Well, I'm kind of with you of the two. I would think, I personally think the Belmont was,
Yeah.
You know, the stumble was bad, but the Belmont was another animal where he, it was like he flashed a turn of foot. Again, I talk about how the dirt races, it's not turn of foot generally speaking. It's an optical illusion. It's who's slowing down slower than everyone else. On turf, it is truly a turn of foot where they're accelerating. But with a horse like a Fleet Alex, and I'd love to go back and see we can do that and see what the actual incrementals were. But he was the one, and you listen to Durkin's call. I mean, he said, you know, Giacomo and a Fleet Alex, and he ran by him like he was standing still, and he just drew off. And again, for a horse who, I guess I don't want to call him, you know, diminutive, but like he wasn't a monster by any stretch.
Not a Dortmund.
No, exactly. But to see him do those sort of things, and that was the thing for me, which was always the bizarre thing coming into ultimately ending up here, that I followed the Triple Crown races, but I didn't really care.
Yeah.
It was just, all right, you know, I'm watching the Derby. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to watch it because everyone else is watching it. And then it took more and more time, and that was how, you know, once I finally got into a position where I was actually caring about it, I went back and rewatched some of those other races and said, well, this was big.
Yeah, and you know, although I hadn't been actively engaged, I mean, I watched all the Derbies. I followed the races. I watched the Breeders' Cup, and I would occasionally even go. My buddies and I, we'd go and we'd bet on the breed. You know, I remember when De Haas won. You know, I loved De Haas. You know, I played that Breeders' Cup, and you know, so it's not like I didn't ever. But I wasn't doing it on a regular basis until 2005. And so I even missed Ghost. I remember Ghost Sapper, but like Ghost Sapper is, for many, one of the best horses in the last 20 years, and he may very well be, but like I wasn't as fully engaged with a horse like Ghost Sapper.
Well, and I was actually going to bring him up to you, Eric. Like, where does he sort of...
I mean, he was a brilliant, fast racehorse, but in the lore, L-O-R-E, of the last 35 years for me, 35 years.
He's not one of the first that comes to mind.
No, he's not. He may not make my top 5, and I know that'll make, you know, a bunch of people shudder. It's part because of the, you know, the relative briefness of the campaign. The Breeders' Cup Classic was sort of a 2-speed number. The Met Mile was terrific. He ran some great races, but when I think of races that got my blood going, you said something funny or interesting that I found interesting when you said you watched American Pharaoh's stride, and this is different. This is not a regular horse. I've almost never felt that way or had that experience, but I did once, and it was in 1983 when Conquistador Cielo ran by me en route to winning the Belmont Stakes by 15 lengths. Now, he wasn't the soundest horse. The race was probably very slop-aided, but he looked like a frickin' machine.
Yeah.
He looked like if there was a cement wall, he would have gone right through it.
Yeah.
And it was breathtaking. And it's not Ghost Sapper's fault. I just never felt that way about him.
Yeah, and I think that's the most interesting thing. Like, there's never going to be a right or wrong answer for this. This is the ultimate sort of opinion question.
Yep.
But I do find it fascinating to see so many different. I think this would be a perfect Twitter question.
Yeah, and there's one horse that, like American Pharaoh, ran all across the country, and hasn't even crossed our lips yet. Is Cigar.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I know that's Pete's.
Yeah.
That's really the horse that kind of got Pete fully into it deep, and understandably so. I'm sure if I were paying attention then.
Not just across the country, across the world.
True. Yeah, when he won the Dubai World Cup.
And that was, you know, "'Tis Now Wins It for America," that type of thing. That was great in the almost immediate aftermath of 9/11. But when he won the Dubai World Cup, that first edition of it, that was as in my recollection, that was as patriotic a moment as I can remember in racing, when people were going to the OTBs or the wagering outlets that were opening early at 10:30 to watch the race. And as I recall, there was no wagering on it, or very limited, but people were going out, and it wasn't that one time, it wasn't about the payoff or the betting. It was about to see if our hero could do it. Yeah.
So I'll mention a few others that really post 2005. Barbaro was another one. Yeah. Absolutely, he was in a different league from the rest. I mean, it's obviously it's a shame what happened. And Bernardini got good. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened had he run in the Breeders' Cup Classic that year with Invisor, Bernardini. But Barbaro was a complete standout for me. One other that I'll put in there, well, two others that I'll mention. Lost in the Fog, who I mentioned before. Granted, it was a different competition, but even when he won the King's Bishop, it just felt like he was a different horse than the rest of the competition he was facing. And I mean, I don't know if he's the greatest ever, but I'm almost answering this from a personal, like, who were my favorites? Sure. I would never bet on him because you couldn't bet on him. He was way too short a price to ever bet on him. But I would, I mean, it was brilliance. I loved watching him race. And then one other one that's maybe a little controversial, but Big Brown, I think, was one. I mean, with whatever happened after Matt, the Dutro and all that sort of stuff. But
when he was on the racetrack,
he was just a horse that looked like he was running a different race from the rest of the field.
Yeah, I think those are, and like you say, again, this is why you brought up the sort of controversial part. It's an all sort of, there's no right or wrong. I mean, you can say that you think a horse is great, and I can disagree vehemently. I don't with any of the horses that we've brought up. But, I'm sure there would be people out there that would, like you say, would take exception to, saying that a Ghost Zapper's not a top 5 or anything like that of the past hour. But all these things, I think that's what makes this game still, for all the discussion we had the other day with Pete. I know you heard a little bit of it, Eric, just kind of the overall where things are, where they can be, this is the kind of thing I think that no matter what, will always make it go.
Yeah.
Sure. You're always going to have those kind of discussions. I brought it up with Fornatale when he was on. The whole, you go way back to that sort of, we'll never get to see let's use this year. We'll never get to see the American Pharaoh shared belief matchup. And I kind of bring it up like that, when they talked about the Marciano Ali, sort of, I don't want to call it doctored, but like the fake fight, and the Marciano unbeaten in the whole nine. It's kind of the same thing. You're always going to have that hypothetical or that mythical race, like who would win, how would it be run, that kind of thing. So, it was an interesting question that I was.
And those battles are one of the greatest things there is about racing. Witness Affirmed Alidar, witness Sunday Silence, Easy Goer, which is one of my most favorite years of racing, 1989. However, sometimes those pitched, protracted battles tend to diminish one's chances of making a Hogan, Bernier, or Wing top, great horse list because, how can you say Sunday Silence, Easy Goer was almost better? Sunday Silence was unbelievable and with a will to win like no other. It just wasn't as straight and fashionably bred and well connected as. And
I don't want to speak for him, but I mean, he had brought this up as a horse when we were talking about it. Dan had brought up. He said it might be Sunday Silence because he was the
terrific.
He was the horse that he, like you say, he may not have been the truest thing you've ever seen, but he just. Some horses want to beat you, and they have that sort of, and this is, I'm not saying just because I'm a major fanboy, but I think, hopefully he comes back as good as he was before, but like, for me, a shared belief, he's not a looker per se. He's not he doesn't look like $1 million. Even when you see him on the racetrack running, his action's not the prettiest looking thing. He didn't look like American Pharaoh.
Yep.
He just is fast. He's not a Ferrari, but he's probably like a Mustang that's got it's just souped up, and he may not look as pretty as American Pharoah, but he can do, you know what I mean?
And he's athletic too. I mean,
and not all, you know, not all athletes are built the same way.
Pretty is as pretty does.
I mean, look at someone like Charles Barkley.
Yeah.
I mean, an undersized. I mean, talk about undersized. 6'5", being generous probably at that point. 6'6" at most.
Mm-hmm.
Power forward.
Broke the
still,
mold. Yeah.
You know, I mean, even like a Dennis Rodman. You know, where you're going down there with the trees down in the paint, and you're still outdoing it. Just because you don't look like the prototypical. And conversely, we've seen how many times athlete, you know, a human or horse that looks like $1 million, and they just don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you know, and I always find those sort of things interesting too. But
well, when I got back into horse racing, that was the height of these ridiculous prices at the sales. I mean, ridiculous. I mean, Mr. Sakaguchi is barely even mentioned, you know, because you had the Green Monkeys and you had all these other, like, whatever, not even 7-figure, 8-figure sale price purchases that just don't happen anymore, and how many of those actually turn into fantastic runners, you know?
Yeah.
They might look like $1 million, but that doesn't necessarily mean they run like $1 million.
this would be an interesting thing, and you seem to be the catalyst of all this. I would throw it out on Twitter and just see. Just throw it out there and say, you know. The second sort of question I had, and we're going to have to make our races when we go through them really quick just because we're going to take some more time on this. I said to Hogan the other day, I said it to Illman the other day, I am in a bit of a rut. I'm in a bit of a wagering rut where it's not that I don't think I'm seeing things clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I've just gotten very loose.
Mm-hmm.
Loose, making bets I never should be making. And it shows. The bankroll is just being chipped away at. And this is, I feel like maybe once a year for a period, I have this feeling where I just feel like I'm kind of, I don't want to say sledding out of control.
Yep.
But darn close to it, where I'm like, all right, we've got to really pull the reins back. One, have you ever been in a position like this?
Absolutely. Keep going.
Two, if so, how do you manage it? How do you get out of the rut and sort of right the ship?
Well, forgive me for butting in, Mike. Nothing will correct that feeling or reverse it like winning.
Right.
However, I'm sure in these recent bets you've been making, you would love to have won some of them.
Oh,
or
sure.
Trust so it's not like for a lack of wanting to win.
Right. No, it's
you
just
know,
a matter of...
It's like when you're pitching. It's like when you're pitching and you can't find the plate.
Yeah.
And then some genius behind you on your team supposedly is being supportive and says, just get it over.
Just throw
What
strikes.
the hell do you think I'm trying to do?
Do you think I'm just trying to... Trying to unless some dice came Matsuzaka.
Right,
I'm nibbling.
What do you think I'm trying to do? Anyway, the best tonic for me is just to take a break, to stop. Now, you have to handicap every day. You may not be able to do it, and I can, as advertising director, I can stop. I don't have to play every day. I don't have to handicap every day. And when I get in a rut like that, or if I'm about to, look, your tournament skill has eclipsed mine by a factor of 100. But if I'm playing a big tournament and I want I won't play for a week prior.
Fresh.
I want focus. I want energy.
Yeah.
I'll even try to eat better that week to try to. So that's me, and that is what will get. Because it's mainly a mental rut more than anything else, and that's what'll, if I change it up, rest, relax, take a break, that's what'll do it for me, more likely than not.
What about you?
So it's interesting because when you first asked the question to me, I was thinking about it more in what you said you're not, what you said is not the issue, which is you said you're still seeing the ball okay, you're just not wagering correctly.
I'm making very, very, so let's look at yesterday as an example. Just to kind of give you guys some context, and anybody listening or watching. Our race of the day that Mike and I did yesterday was the 7th at Del Mar, 5 furlongs turf sprint.
Yes.
Holy Loop came and got his run back in. I liked a horse called DeGiorgio, who ultimately was disqualified and placed last. That doesn't bother me. That part.
Did that horse win? Finish first?
No. He ran 5th.
Okay.
But the bigger thing for me was, I said going into it, I set it up, I got more than enough as far as the odds were concerned. So I should have just capped it at the $20 win bet, because he went off at 15-1. But I looked at it and said, I don't think Holy Loot is going to win. He may be the most likely winner, but I don't think he's going to win. And there are a couple other horses that I think have a realistic chance. One of them being the 8 Richards Boy, another one being the 5 Hey Dude, and another one being the horse that Mike liked, the number 4, 2 Winnie Hall Rocks.
Okay.
So I'm looking through it, but I also am using DiGiorgio, and I get so many things going through my head. So initially, this turned in from what should have just been nothing more than a $20 win bet at odds that I was more than comfortable with. It turned into an $80 loss because I ended up playing trifectas, superfectas, this, that, and the other thing, and I just don't have them in the right sort of order. And again, this, maybe it sounds like I'm crying over spilt milk, but it's an honest question. I'm going, one, it probably is just a discipline thing. I shouldn't have even bothered going down that rabbit hole. But what do you, I mean, I was in a spot where I really thought he's the most likely winner, Holy Loop, but I don't think he's going to. He's coming into it. His latest workout report from Ann Harrington, it just didn't sound good. Like he wasn't coming into it in good shape.
I had a negative stat on
the whole Breeders' Cup thing, the debacle where he didn't get to go. So again, that ended up being $60 more that I lost when I probably shouldn't have even put that 60 in to begin with.
So I'll answer the question 2 ways. I'll answer it the way if you're not seeing the ball correctly. This is not what you asked, but this is something that sometimes happens where it's just like I can't pick a winner, or I'm feeling lost. I look at the race and I can't come up with any opinions.
Where we've all been there too.
Yeah. Or I can come up with an opinion, but I know even before the race goes off, it's no good.
Right. So when I'm feeling in that, I handicap a circuit that I don't normally play.
Okay.
Because what that does is it forces me to get back to the basics. If I'm always playing Naira or Southern California, I know how Bob Baffert does off of long layoffs. I know the horse. Oh, this one, I underestimated this horse. Well, I still think he's not good enough. Or I loved this horse before, and I still think he's got it. You come in with so many preconceived notions about a lot of the horses if it's a circuit that you're following. And if you're not seeing the ball correctly, just put it aside. Pick up the form for a track that you rarely play, where you don't really know the horses, you don't really know the circuit, you know some of the trainers, but not most. That helps me start fresh and see it fresh. And then it gets back to the basics of form and class and pace and that sort of stuff, because sometimes you can lose that when you know the horses too well.
Yep.
For what you're talking about, though, I think the answer is really almost simplifying the wagers, pulling back. You have to handicap every day, and you have to follow the races every day, and you end up getting a bit of an edge if you know and see subtle things that maybe others don't see. But pull back a little bit. Just do win wagers or win place wagers. Just really, really simplify it.
Yeah.
And I had a similar mistake. I did all right yesterday playing Aqueduct, but I made mistake. I played like ridiculously. I played a 50-cent pick 4 that cost me $4, singling to a horse in the last leg that I thought was going to get the lead and didn't. But I didn't like, in the second to last leg, the 2 favorites. Hated both of them. And I liked 2 others that were 6 and 7 or 8 to 1. The one and then I started honing in on one of the 2, and I was like, no, this one I think is going to win. 8 to 1. I didn't play a win bet.
Right.
Because I was alive in the pick 4, and so the horse wins, pays $19.40. My horse in the last leg doesn't win. I come out with nothing. Granted, I didn't put a whole lot into it. But I walk away because I'm wrong in the last leg with nothing on this $19 plus winner. So that I think it's like, okay, if you have an opinion like you had with that one horse, just do the win bet. Don't try and get too greedy.
That's what I should have done. And it really, if I thought Holy Loop, again, it sounds, I don't want to say, contradictory, but he was the most likely winner, but I didn't think he was going to win.
Right.
If that makes
sure. Yeah, because you can have a 20% chance in a 8-horse field and 15 and whatever. Right. Yeah, I got it.
So that was the thing. I'm going through, and all along I just kind of settled. So, and we'll tie in another face and name that you've seen on the podcast if you watched or listened. I text Jonathan Kinchin. I go, are you at Del Mar yet? Because he's out there playing in their contest this weekend. So he calls me. First he sends me a picture of a beverage at Del Mar in a Del Mar Cup.
That's a good thing.
So I go, okay. And he calls me, and he goes, you know, I really like the 8, Richard's boy. And I said, what do you think of the 6? He goes, I really like the 6. He goes, I'm afraid that the 6, this is nothing more than a prep to stretch him out to go longer. And ultimately, the 8 ends up winning. He ended up getting shafted because the 4 and the 5, they ended up bobbing for 3rd and 4th. If it had gone the other way, he would have had the triple for $15 or trifecta. Instead, I don't think he got anything out of it. But it was a matter of I should have just stuck with the win bet. Like you say, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things.
Well,
and get greedy. Don't get greedy.
And you were getting enough of a price.
I guess that's the thing that I'm so sour about, that I still, like, I was getting, and not only was I getting the price, I was getting, Jesus, almost 200 times what 200% more than what I thought he should have been. I actually, I had an acceptable win number on him at 9-2, which is a 50% overlay of what I thought he should have gone off at, because he and Holy Loot, 3-back, ran the same race. Holy Loot comes back to win that green flash, and then he's run subsequently fine. I just thought, boy, at 15-1, I'm getting 200% on top. I should have just said, forget it, I'm taking the win bet, and that's it.
Yeah, I love what
and I was
Mike
wrong,
said about,
but, you know, ultimately,
it's okay.
You're going to be wrong.
It's okay.
yeah, you're going to be wrong more than you're going to be right. When you're in a slump, the thing I try to ask myself sometimes, and I love the advice about playing a different track, an abnormal track. I try to separate in my head what I really know from what I think I know, or what I'm supposing. And not to pile on Mike, when he said, oh, I lost on a horse I thought would get the lead but didn't. To me, that would be something I'm supposing. I think this horse will get a lead. All right, I might be wrong about that. I'd rather, especially when I'm slumping, bet on things I know, like this horse just ran a bang-up race against a stakes horse, and now he's in with lesser.
Okay.
As long as, provided that the public doesn't really know that, or the majority don't, or this horse was on a dead rail last time. So if I can, sometimes even at Saratoga, one thing I think I know going 2 turns is, I know this horse has the rail, and that's an advantage there.
Sure.
So I'll try to boil it down to what I know versus what I'm...
Facts compared to assumptions.
Hopes or suppositions. Yep.
So, no, and I just wanted to get other takes on it, you know.
Yeah, I'll also, one of the things, and part of the reason why I had a good day yesterday at Aqueduct is there was a horse I liked at 24-1, and I put a win bet on him, and the horse won easily. So I was doing okay, but I played a double to a horse that I liked in the next leg that was going to be a good price, and the double was paying over $650. And so I'm alive to that double. I had the win bet, so, you know, doing all right. Alive to the double. And then I was like, oh boy, I think this horse is live. Opened up 15-1 morning line, opened up at 7-2, floated up to like 11-1. I didn't put another win bet because I was covered in that double.
Yeah, you're happy.
But what I did was I wheeled him on the bottom of the exacta, and he ended up getting nosed out at the wire by a 15-1 Gary Siaka horse. So I ended up having a saver exacta. I lost my $650 on the double, but you know, that sort of thing, like where I can be right that horse was going to run a good race and was good value at those odds, but still be wrong that he didn't win. And so at certain odds, I will, above 10-1, I add in a place bet or start playing around underneath in the exactas. At more than 20-1, I go across the board. It might not be an even. I mean, some people like to do the latter where they do smaller 5, win.
10, 15.
Yeah, I do it the other way.
15.
I do it the other way. I would much rather do a larger win bet on a horse that I think is providing value, like you said, fair value is 9-2. I would do a larger win bet and then stagger it down so that the place and show is maybe more just a saver to get my money back.
See, I guess at that point, then I would look at it and say, I'm just going to punt on those underneath places. You know,
but I might do it depending on my I might do like in your case
well.
In your case like a 20-10-10. You know,
fair, yeah.
Not like 25-2 or something like that, but 20-10-10.
Yeah.
So that because a 15-1 shot hits the board,
give $6 to show it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So that I just wanted to kind of float that and get some vibes to try to hit the reset button or the refresh button. We've gone for a little while now. We've got 4 races that we're going to talk about. The public handicapper season is over for a little while anyway. They'll come back here in a few weeks.
Gulfstream, yep.
But until then, I think we figured there's some decent races this weekend. I don't want to take a lot of time on them. Let's just go through 1 or 2 thoughts on each race. Let's start. We're going to do them in chronological order from post time, positions, and what all that kind of garbage, whatever you want to call them. 3:20 Eastern tomorrow scheduled, the 7th at Aqueduct, Grade 3 Red Smith Handicap. Field of 10. One of them is an also eligible K-Tron down the inside, so likely we'll have 9. Maybe there'll be less. Who knows with scratches. Let's start with Eric. Big field. Horses that we are familiar with. There's a lot of them that they don't seem to be fans of winning very often. Where, if you had to make a play, where would you lean? Or let's give me 2 contenders that you're looking at.
First of all, Kigan and Mr. Speaker are the 2 favorites. They both have somewhat distance issues. Kigan I just don't think of as a marathon horse, although his trainer did win this race last year with Dynamic Sky, who's also sort of in the same category. Mr. Speaker you think of as a hardy horse, but he's never been this long. Almost by contract, I'm going to play nearly every time a horse like Mr. Maybe, number 9, who is basically as fast as these, has won at the distance, and is getting 7 pounds off going 1 mile 3/8. As Mr. Hogan knows, I'm a sucker for these things, and it's a good field, but I'm Mr. Maybe with that buyer figure and that weight off, at 5-1. If he's 3-1, I'll bet him.
Mike Hogan.
Yeah, I'm against Kigan. I'm against War Dancer especially, who I wrote Pack Animal next to. He seems to run to his competition, but a couple lengths behind them. And those are the kinds of horses that I don't want to bet at short prices. There are a couple that, just from trainer stats, are intriguing to me and that are going to be decent prices. Great Dancer, jockey-trainer combo in turf routes, 3 for 6 with a 13.20 ROI, and they're all Matt Shera horses. I don't know if he's going to win, but again, the Eric Wing angle, he's getting a ton of weight from the rest of the field, and he could outrun his 20-1 morning line. The other one that interests me is the, I don't have the numbers on my Saturday stakes preview in the daily racing form, but the Holiday Star for Graham Motion coming off the win in the 12 furlong Sycamore last out, facing a few of the others that he's going to see again tomorrow. Graham, second off a layoff in turf graded stakes routes with last out winners, 5 for 15. All 5 were different horses, 453 ROI. He's one that might be a little overlooked because on numbers he seems like he's a little too slow, but he wants to win. He's a horse that wins.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I was going to accent or supplement your formulator stats with my visual impression that it never looked to me like Holiday Star was going to lose the Sycamore. And
right.
He's just resolute.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I look at that race. There's 3 you mentioned coming out of the Sycamore. One of them being St. Albans. Boy, he came back to win the Laurel Turf Cup, but that was against sort of a mediocre-ish field. Charming Kitten is Charming Kitten. I just think we kind of know what he is. I've never looked at him as a sort of brilliant kind of horse. I think he's a stayer, but I don't know that he actually likes to win. The 2 horses I'm interested in, one of them is Holiday Star. I think he'll be a fair number in here. I think Kagan may be the best horse in the race. I don't think he wants the distance. Mr. Speaker, I think he's right there. I think he's going to be there if you're playing any sort of a triple or a super. I think you got to use him.
Yep.
I'm taking a shot with a horse. I lost with him in the Bowling Green at a big number. I'm hopeful he'll be a decent number in here for Clement, the 5 Iron Power. Sylvester D'Souza has the mount. This is a horse in a race where I don't think there is much speed. I'm hopeful that they kind of let him go. He gets in light. I'm not a big weight guy, but going this far, maybe it factors in. I'll take a shot, although I'll acknowledge that he's probably not a graded stakes type horse.
I struggle with this horse in looking at this race. The last 2 times, and in particular the last time, Matt, I felt like Jose Ortiz was under instructions to teach this horse to rate. Christophe decided he's too rank. Christophe does not mind having horses on the lead. He does not like having horses who aren't relaxed. I think that's the goal, is to teach this horse to relax. And at least the last 2 races, it's resulted in, what some would call grabbing or wrangling back. I agree. If I knew right now that he was going to get sent or just allowed to go out there by himself, I would like him more than I do.
And I think the thing, too, for me, I guess, even if he's not outright on the lead, he will be right there. Even if
yeah, he'll get a good
you would
trip.
hope
he'll be up there with War Dancer.
He'll be. Yeah, I was
hope
going to say,
so.
if it's not him, it's War Dancer, I think, on the front end. So that'll be an interesting one. Let's go to one of the races down at Laurel Park. It's the Saturday Formulator race today. You can take a look at it. Mike Beer and I have got a preview already done. The 10th at Laurel's, the Francis Dash, $350,000 the purse. The two names everyone knows, Stallwalk and Dude Palace. A couple other interesting ones in here. Let's go the reverse order as far as things are concerned. Mike, who do you like for contenders in here? Any sort of a long shot that you like?
First, I'm going to ask you a question. Is Stallwalking Dude for sure to go? Because I know Jacobson was on the fence a couple days ago, and I hadn't heard anything further.
The only thing I know is that depending on when you are looking at the PPs, if you look and see John Velasquez, it's not. It's Trevor McCarthy. That's all I know.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're planning on running or not.
Okay. So that in I'm kind of against him in here. I mean, he can win, but I just don't rely on him at a shorter price. The interesting thing of the two contenders you mentioned, interesting thing for me is Palace, as a 6-year-old, after 27 career starts, is now getting blinkers for the first time, and off of a win.
Yeah, Linda's only done that 3 times.
Yes, and none of them hit the board. Right. However, so it's usually a negative when you put blinkers on or take them off after a win because it's not something.
Don't fix it.
Right, exactly. However, what I did was I dug a little deeper, and I came up with a very, very interesting stat with Linda, putting blinkers on the last 2 years, not just off a win, but horses that finished in the money the prior start. You want to guess what her stat is with that?
I mean, it's too deep. Just help us all out.
Seven for 12. 7 for 12. Blinkers on after an in-the-money finish last 2 years.
But they're not, those horses weren't winners.
No.
Right, those horses
But-
might have
and they
just
were-
needed a little
Yeah, I was gonna
something
say,
to get over the
presumably
top.
they
weren't Palace.
But presumably they ran well.
But they weren't Palace.
No. Look, I'm not saying this means Palace is going to win. I just thought it was, because 3 is not a large sample, as you know.
No, not at
But
all.
what I wanted to do was see, okay, is this a negative for her? And so I did in the money because presumably those horses ran well enough to hit the board. They may have been beaten the neck. They may have been beaten 10 lengths and finished 3rd. But even still, it was not a horrible effort, not a complete toss. They weren't pulled up. 7 for 12
the only
is
thing
notable.
about him that I really think the only reason they're coming on, if you watch the replay of the Hudson, he has his head cocked and he's looking out at the grandstand, and he's never done that before. He didn't do that in the Vosburg. I don't recall him ever doing it last year when he was razor sharp. I wonder if this is just a sign that she thinks that he's really just kind of, I don't want to say losing it, but that he's not focused on the task at hand anymore. Maybe this gets him a little bit more focused. But my personal opinion, I don't want him.
I wouldn't want him, especially at a short price. For me, the most interesting horse in the race is the horse on the outside, Trouble Kid. And we can debate as to why he went from being a horse that couldn't win a bottom-level maiden claimer at Gulfstream Park West, Gulfstream, and even at Parks, and then was claimed and landed in Ramon Preciado's barn, and all of a sudden reels off 4 fantastic efforts, including a win in the Grade 3 Gallon Bob. That said, he is a legitimately fast horse early. And he may be spring to the sky with the exception who probably really would prefer turf or at least a wet track. I think Trouble Kid could be the most brilliant horse in the race and could be the fastest horse early in the race. And from an outside post, he could just take them the whole way around.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm likely to bet gentleman's bet in this race. I think he may just be overall as or more talented than anybody in this field on the face of it. When he's good, he's good. His race behind Ivan Fulanovolot earlier this year, actually he beat Ivan Fulanovolot. He's a good horse, Ivan, even though he kind of came a cropper in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And his form took a dip, and then to me his race in the Phoenix is a lot better. It's almost a dark and hidden race with the bad start and sort of a rush up. not to the same degree as Run Happy, but a rush up nonetheless. To me, and he was trying to get into the Breeders' Cup and got excluded. He was on the AE list. To me, that last race, if he can run that race again, but more professionally, he'll beat these.
We have no chance because the 2 horses that I picked, I went 9-8 in this race. So I know Mike Watchmaker, the Weekend Warrior, he picked the 8 Gentleman's
Did
Bet
he?
for the same reasons. I'm with you as well. That sort of mid-move rush up inside, and he ran on very well. Oh boy!
What price do you think he's going to be though? My concern was he was going to be a little short.
Oh no! See, I think he's going to get lost. I think
Really?
Trouble Kid is going to be the one. Everyone.
Really?
I think he'll be the wise guy horse.
Okay.
He's 9-2 on the morning line. Trouble Kid. I think he goes up short of that. Palace and Stalwalk and Dude will both be in the 2-1 range.
If Stalwalk and Dude doesn't go though,
If Stalwalk and Dude doesn't go, then it'll be
makes it
Palace
hard.
and Trouble Kid. I think Gentleman's Bet you'll probably get the 6, if not more.
really,
But I'm with you guys as far as the 9 and the 8. I think the 9 sits off the Spring to the Sky. Spring to the Sky, it is fascinating, though, that he's in this race.
yeah,
Because he's speed.
right,
Bruce Brown is a sharp guy.
yeah.
This is a horse who is clearly a turf horse. I don't think he's entering him here just for the heck of it.
No,
I think it's very, very interesting. And if he is the controlling speed, like I think he is, because I think they're going to try and have the same trip for Trouble Kid as last time, where he sat off. Spring to the Sky is a little intriguing.
I think Bruce Brown's hoping for a wet track.
Oh, that may be the case, and maybe they scratch him. They don't try, but I think he is a little bit intriguing.
Yeah, sure.
See, I copied Watchmaker on the Red Smith also.
Oh boy!
I did not
Uh-oh.
read.
You didn't read
I
the
did not
column?
read the
Uh-oh.
column before airtime.
Oh look, Matt,
What do
I'm
you
flipping through the stakes preview, and do you see who's running at Turf Paradise?
got? I do see that. Track Attack.
Your buddy Track Attacker.
Good for him.
Yeah,
Is he done anything this year?
he's 1 for 1
How about that?
at 2 to 5.
Well, that was a given.
What are we up to now?
10th race at Churchill. The Grade
Good
2
race.
Mrs. Revere. 18 3-year-old fillies are entered. 18 of them, only 14 can go. Again, this is a race you can go a bunch of different ways. I'll just kind of throw. I haven't done a deep dive yet. We'll be doing a preview of it later this afternoon. I've got to watch some tape. I think there's a couple in here that are interesting. Onus might be a freak. I don't know. I don't know if she's been beating in Maryland. We'll find out. I think Partisan Politics is a deserving contender in a shortish price. I guess the one I'm most interested in thus far, and I've got to watch and see what she beat last time, is probably Tammy the Torpedo. I thought, there's nothing wrong with your 2 career losses being against Lady Eli. I'm not going to hold that against you. Other than that, I know it's been against inferior competition, but I think she's a little bit interesting in here. But let's hear what you boys have to say. Eric?
I have a lot of respect for Tammy the Torpedo in here. I'll tell you one horse that Onus beat, Matt, and that's Stormy Regatta, who ran Partisan Politics to a nose decision in the risk-averse back at Saratoga. Onus spit on Stormy Regatta.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see this horse run. Beyond that, my only little interesting nugget is I like Kath Ballou a little bit underneath.
Okay.
I think if Onus runs a race and she's kind of runs the way she has at Laurel, taking command at the 8th pole and then drawing off, then the exact is going to come from somebody who's closing from behind. And that could be Kath Ballou, who, because of my advanced age, I'm predisposed to like Devil's Bag and the pedigree of any horse running on the grass, which she is for the first time. And this is a legitimate stakes horse who's brought home checks in 4 straight graded stakes on the dirt. McPeak and Leparoux work for me on the grass, as does Devil's Bag. So Kath Ballou is, to me, my clever horse under Onus. The only thing I just want to filibuster for 15 seconds. If you're not a stakes winner or you haven't just popped a big buyer, you're probably 30 or 50 to 1 in this race. That's how deep it is.
Yeah.
It's a really good race. And to me, for years, even though there's no QE2 horse in this race, horsemen know every time this year you're running the QE2 and then you can run in the Mrs. Revere at Churchill.
Yeah.
And it's predictable. Both races always draw big fields. And it's nice when the sport knows what's coming up next, as opposed to some of these races where you have, 3 stakes races in the same division
Sure.
across an 8-day period.
Where you have it planned out nicely. I'm trying to remember what day we had 3 3-year-old stakes races. Oh, it was Jim Dandy weekend.
Mountain
Haskell
West
weekend,
Virginia.
Derby.
Yep.
I go, what for what? What are we doing here? I mean, we're just
like
cannibalizing
4, I
each
think.
other.
Yeah.
This is a joke.
Yeah.
But this
Curling was also
right.
the weekend.
Yep.
this QE2 Mrs. Revere couplet, if you will, has been in place almost like as far back as I can remember, and the darn thing just works.
Yeah.
And it's never worked more.
Stunning, right? Stunning
Yeah.
that when you logically lay things out, it actually works. That's shocking.
But it's a great race, and I can't wait to see Onus, but it's a deep field.
That was the longest 15-second filibuster I've ever.
Sorry. I'm blaming Matt for a few seconds of that.
I was going to say, I chopped it. Okay.
I'm just teasing. So yeah, I don't really see a ridiculous long shot in here. I think the most logical ones are Onus, whether or not she is a freak. I think Chad Brown has to be respected with his 2 runners. I'm kind of against Isabella Sings both. I'm not sure she's good enough, and I just don't think she's. I think she needs to wire this field. I think she's going to have company on the front end with Robillard in there. I have some very interesting stats on McLaughlin in Kentucky. In stakes races in the last 5 years, he's 0 for 36 in the state of Kentucky. And in non-stakes races in the state of Kentucky, he's 18 for 31. Which is crazy, crazy, crazy. Obviously, that has to, maybe I'm going to reverse mush him into the winner's circle here with Robillard, but I just found that really, really surprising. The one that I kind of like a bit in here, making her second start for Christophe Clement, is Divine Aida.
The Weekend Warrior.
He just reads Watchmaker and copies his picks. That Hogan
his
guy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's why I'm completely against Gentleman's Bet. But, second start off of a long layoff. The blinkers come off. As you mentioned, might have been, Christophe wants this horse to relax a little bit, Eric. Joe Bravo has been only behind your buddy Florent Giroux, who's riding Tammy the Torpedo, the best bet of any jockey in a graded stakes race this year. Bravo has been, in a long career, this is a career year for Joe Bravo. He's riding as well as he ever has been. I think Divine Aida will be a little overlooked in the wagering and present a good price, although it is worth noting that Javier makes the trip for partisan politics when presumably he could have stayed home and gotten a good mount in the Red Smith.
Final race
Or
we'll
the
look
De
at.
Francis.
Or the De Francis.
Just gone down to the different.
Final race we'll look at is the 8th at Del Mar, Saturday night, the Bob Hope Grade 3, formerly known as the Hollywood Preview. 2-year-old, 7 furlongs on the main track. Baffert has 2 in here. I don't want either one of them.
Hollendorfer has 2 as well.
He does. I don't want either Baffert, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
Mr. Wing, you had mentioned to me yesterday before you left that you had a fun little tidbit about a horse in here.
No, at first I was looking at this race and I wasn't really coming up with much. At first, and I look at the form, unless this is a misprint, but Mac Daddy Mac and Jury beat a pretty good field last time, or it was a decent maiden field. Mac Daddy Mac, a private purchase by the connections of Mucho Macho Man, as many of you probably heard or read. But they both ran, Jury and Mac Daddy Mac, on October 24th, same distance, 5.5 furlongs. Mac Daddy Mac runs 3/5 of a second faster and yet gets a buyer figure 4 points lower. I don't remember anything super memorable about that day at Del Mar. So to me, the Mac Daddy Mac buyer might be a little artificially low. And in point of fact, if he's 3/5 of a second faster, he's supposed to get a buyer figure about 6, at 5.5 furlongs, probably about 9 points more than Jury. So if that number is supposed to be an 86 instead of a 73, suddenly he's become your most likely winner at 8-1 morning line. And coupled with the fact that, to me, they saw something in this horse to buy him. He was a $200,000 purchase, so presumably they spent a lot more than that to get him after his first start. They immediately reach out for Gary Stevens, who was their Mucho Macho Man hero. To me, and I don't feel confident, I don't mean to sound overly verbose or like I'm puffing my chest out, but to me, all the little things point to Mac Daddy Mac.
Okay.
I like your thought about being against both the Bafferts because I am as well. And Eric, I like your thinking. For me, it's Mac Daddy Mac and the two Hollendorfers. I'm not sure, and some of it will come down to price as to who I like the best of them. But I note from a trainer standpoint, Kathy Ridvo, with the exception of a couple notable ones, Fast Anna and Mucho Macho Man, she's a little underwhelming and often underperforms with many of her runners, especially some of the 2-year-olds. So I wouldn't. If you're right and you get a good price and is most likely winner, then absolutely. I know there's a lot of steam on this horse, and if the horse ends up getting bet pretty heavily, I might be a little bit against. But I got 2 stats for the 2 Hollendorfers. Jerry Hollendorfer is 6 for 15 with 4 seconds as well, so that's 10 out of 15 in the exacta. 230 ROI with juveniles in dirt races in their second career start off of a win. So I like that a little bit, and of course, as you note, or you didn't note, but I'm sure you would note, he's getting 4 pounds from Bob Baffert's Taves on Ice, your likely favorite. And then the other Hollendorfer, he's going turf to dirt and cutting back to a sprint from a route. When Baffert does that last 5 years, Hollendorfer does that last 2 years. He's 5 for 19, 365 ROI, 4 others ran second, so 10 of 19 in the exacta. I think they could both run well and maybe hit the board at a decent price.
Mike Beer and I will have a preview of this race this afternoon. 7-5 for me. I'm already there for Hollendorfer. Turns back, goes turf to dirt, all the stuff that Hogan was just talking about. You also have to look at it. I like that he's forwardly placed. You go to that race 2 back in that Del Mar Juvenile Turf. There's a horse called Mighty Moses who ran 9th. He came back to run 2nd to Esposito, who's a Tom Proctor horse, who got a 72 buyer in that spot. That was a few days ago. So he beat a good horse that day. I think it's an interesting move that they're going to do this. The 5 Mac Daddy Mac, same deal for you guys. I mean, it's a lot of things that go into this one. I don't think we're getting anything close to 8-1.
No, I agree.
7-2,
No.
4-1.
No.
Yeah.
I think he's your wise guy.
Taves on Ice is going to be
Taves on Ice could be 6-5.
Or 6-5.
Let me give you the jury first off. Jury that day beat a horse called Iron Rob. Iron Rob looks like he has ability, but he's yet to get the job done. He came back and made his turf debut last time out. It was garbage. I don't know what Jury beat that day because you also have to keep in mind there were 2 Bafferts in there. One of them was a horse that they paid a ton of money for who hasn't done anything. His name is slipping my mind at the moment. The other one was Oppenum, who just didn't pick his feet up. I believe that's a Juddmonte horse. I'm dubious about the overall race for Jury.
Fair.
The 2 Bafferts, the big reason I don't like either one of them, and I'm sure one of them will win by 15. Baffert is very similar to Pletcher in that the 2-year-olds are cranked and ready to go, and more often than not, they're professional. Both of these horses, Taves on Ice last time out in the Speakeasy, down the lane, goes back to his left lead. Finished well, but back to his left lead. I don't like that. I know he's paired up buyers, and it's a big angle for me. I don't like that he went back to his left lead. Dr. Dorr, he never changed leads at all. He was bet down to 11-10. I understand he did beat Esposito that day. Again, I talked about Esposito. He came back to win with the 78. I hate seeing a horse that did not change leads. I'll let him beat me at that point. Both of the Bafferts, they'll both take money. Give me 7-5 in the Bob Hope. I think that about wraps it up. We've been on for about an hour, a little more than that.
I like it.
If you're listening, thanks for listening. That was SoundCloud, on the website, DRF.com, on
YouTube,
iTunes. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Eric Wing, any final thoughts from you?
No, thanks for the memories.
Oh, wow. Thanks for the memories. I don't know. I hope they're good memories. I don't want to find out that you're never going to come back to us at some point.
No. It's the Bob Hope race. So I felt necessary to invoke his slogan.
Better that than some sort of racial joke, racist joke.
Why would I do that?
I don't know. Okay, we'll just leave that at that.
Bizarre. All right.
It's just in the air, I guess.
Go on with
with what's going on in the news.
Just Tell us what you have for a webinar.
I've left Matt speechless. I love it.
Don't know where it's going.
All right, so we had some webinars over the Breeders' Cup. We had a little bit of a lull since then. We're starting back up with a whole series of webinars. I'll be tweeting it out later, maybe today, maybe early next week. You can sign up for a whole bunch of webinars. The first of which is going to be next week with Mr. Andy Beyer talking about. Many of you have heard he's come out with some adjustments to the figures that he does for turf races. So this is an opportunity for him to explain that a little further. He wrote an article that's up at drf.com right now about it. But it's also a chance for you guys to come and ask your questions to Andy Beyer about the thinking and about his figures and about the changes that are happening for the ones on the turf. That'll be next Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, I will tweet out a link, but I'm sure on drf.com starting next week you'll see ways to sign up for that webinar. So
very good.
Be fun.
A lot of good stuff coming up, drf.com. Check it all out. For Mike Hogan, Eric Wink, Matt Bernier, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll check back in with you on Tuesday next week. Maybe we'll have Fornatel back. We'll see. Maybe I'll be back.
Who knows?
Who knows? Thanks for listening. DRF Players Podcast.